My guest today is Albert Castellana. Albert is the co-founder and CEO at Yeager AI, building GenLayer. We'll learn all about this today. Welcome to the show, Albert.
Andy, thanks for having me here.
It is a pleasure. Let's do what we do at the beginning of the show, Albert. Be cool if you could please introduce yourself. Love to hear some of your personal and professional backstory. Yeah, what has led you to founding Yeager AI?
All right. So my background is in computer science. I've been in crypto since 2013. Before crypto, I had set up a couple of startups. One of them was an algorithmic traded fund, and I did as well like some online marketing stuff. But then I got into Bitcoin, then Ethereum, had a small consulting firm trying to sell Solidity smart contracts. Eventually, I co-founded NEM.io, like the foundation, which was essentially an L1 back in the day, like 2014, 15, got to like top 4 in CoinMarketCap. From there, I joined Radix DLT, another one, as the chief product officer. I met my co-founder there, Edgar's, and since then we've been looking at different projects. We co-founded as well, and I was the CEO at StakeHound, which was the first liquid staking solution. And about a couple of years ago as well, with our third co-founder, Jose Maria, we've been essentially looking into the world of AI agents, the LLMs, and all these different things that are coming out really, really strong right now. So we've been looking into different iterations of that and how to actually make it, useful for humanity.
And so I suppose your first product, or the main product that you guys are building at Yeager, you call it GenLayer, right? And I think the easy way to describe it or talk about that is you describe it as the intelligence layer of the internet. But yeah, jump in, Albert. Just GenLayer. What are we doing here?
All right. So if you think about it, like there's thousands of blockchains out there, right? And they all basically have the same type of features. One may be faster, cheaper, so on, but they all have the same kind of feature set. You can write code. This code will be executed throughout the world, right? And so on. I think we all more or less understand that, right? The question is like, what else can we do that is not allowed by that, right? There's a couple of things that we can't do in that type of architecture. One of them, which few people understand, is, why can't blockchains connect to the internet, right? Why do they need oracles, for example, right? Or why can't they run other type of, language, such as natural language, right? Now we have AI. AI is capable of doing both code and natural language, right? And then what's happening here is like, we're essentially creating a new type of blockchain. Let's call it an intelligent blockchain. The reason because of that is that we're essentially using AI at the consensus level, right? So unlike all the other blockchains that essentially have a static consensus algorithm, what we're proposing is a dynamic consensus algorithm where each validator of the network is connected to a different LLM, and essentially they reach an agreement on subjective decisions such as what they saw on the internet, whether a DAO should be doing this or that, right? I mean, a bunch of different things. I'm sure we'll talk about the use cases, but essentially that's the idea, right? Creating a blockchain that is capable of understanding natural language, connecting natively to the internet, and making subjective decisions without the need of humans in the loop, essentially.
Got it. Okay, well, I'm sure we can indeed go through some of those use cases, Albert, because they're fascinating. Just before we do that, another interesting way or fascinating way of talking about this, it's on your website, but you talk about optimistic democracy and how that's at the heart of GenLayer. Just, tell us what you mean by optimistic democracy.
Yeah. So, I mean, a consensus algorithm has different pieces in general, right? So our consensus algorithm focuses on the validation of these non-deterministic operations, right? So blockchains normally, because they're just code, right? You need that every validator in the network sees the same inputs and get the same outputs, right? It's totally deterministic. The problem is that, well, the internet is not deterministic, right? You're going to a web, every time you're getting a different web, right? The cookie ID has changed, the advertisement has changed, or even the content, right? That's why the internet is not deterministic, and that's why blockchains can't connect to the internet, right? That's why they need something in the middle, a trusted third party that can send them information from the outside world, right? Now, what we're doing here is like, the question is, how do we create a consensus algorithm that can deal with non-deterministic operations such as the web or such as a large language model, right? And we do this by essentially changing the validation stage of the consensus, which normally, as I said before, it's static, right? I have 5, I'm sending you 3, that's all good. I have, 2, I'm sending you 4, that's not good, right? That's the static part, right? It's just like very clear, ifs and thens and so on. We're changing that by essentially having that each validator is connected to a different LLM, and that's where the optimistic democracy consensus algorithm kicks in, right? Which is, how do you get from 1,000 validators for them to reach consensus on something that's happening and they're seeing like something subjective, right? And the way we approach this is essentially from the 1,000 validators, there's a subset of 5 that are selected at random. One of them is the leader. The other 4 are validators, right? Then the leader essentially goes out to the internet, does whatever it needs to do, proposes an output. The other validators as well, they go out to the internet, they do whatever they need to do. They essentially compare their output with the leader. And if they agree in a majority vote, then the transaction is accepted, right? So as simple as that, right? So subset, all of them, they validate, they compare their output with the leader, and then accepted or not accepted, change of leader, accepted, you can appeal if you want, right? So if you're still not happy with the output, right, you can appeal. It's essentially based on the wisdom of the crowd, this thing called the jury theory, right? It's like, you don't want a single judge to decide your fate, because maybe the judge is like, 80, 90% correct. What you want to have is a majority vote of multiple participants, and if, diverse opinions converge on certainty, right? And that's how the consensus reaches an agreement. That's a one agreement without having a centralized party.
Got it. Thank you, Albert. Okay. We said that we would do use cases. So I think there will be a variety of different use cases that you're working on. But yeah, talk us through some of the use cases that particularly that you think that, GenLayer unlocks that perhaps aren't so easy with the current generation of blockchains.
Yeah. So on GenLayer, you really can do everything that you can do in any other blockchain as well, right? So like you can do obviously totally deterministic code. But essentially where on, say, for example, on DeFi right now, you have a bunch of places where you have oracles or where you have humans in the loop, right? So if you look, for example, at prediction markets, right now, Polymarket uses UMA, right? That's essentially a bunch of humans going out and figuring the stuff out, right? Each one of them with their biases, and they reach an agreement, right? Some of them may know better the topic or worse, right? So instead of that, what we're proposing is that instead of having all these humans making these decisions and going out to the internet, those is essentially a bunch of AIs that have their own, definition of what's correct or not correct to be able to reach an agreement between them. So if you want to improve prediction markets, that's how you move them from, being thousands of dollars to essentially get a single decision down to like $1 or $2, something like that, right? If you want to do, parametric insurance, which is something we don't really see in crypto, right? So that's why are there no decentralized insurance on slashing, for example? Well, because it really takes a lot of overhead, right? And there's no on-chain data source for that right now, right? So that we can do, right? If you're looking, for example, at decentralized autonomous organizations, right now, mainly they are, multi-sigs. You have 20 people on a multi-sig. They're just looking at snapshot. They do whatever is being said in snapshot. That's not really decentralized or autonomous, right? What happens if instead you have what we call an intelligent contract, which is capable of going out to the internet, to snapshot, seeing the votes and proposals and so on, and then making a decision, right? Now, the magic here is that the way that this dynamic consensus algorithm works is that the developer can define the threshold of acceptance, right? And it can say, okay, the proposal that the leader is proposing, right? It's valid or not? Is it legal or not? Or does it have the best ROI? For example, if you did a discounted cash flow, all of these things you're going to be able to execute, which means that as the AIs becomes more powerful, then the whole network, the whole GenLayer network will become more powerful as well, which is a characteristic that you don't really see in many places, right? The more power that the AI has in terms of, processing capabilities, understanding of natural language, and, even like coding capabilities, the more power that GenLayer will have, right? So, there's tons of things from, being able to dynamically adjust the fees or the liquidation levels of a DeFi protocol based on what's happening on centralized exchanges to, really like anything where you need access to the internet. And if you think about it, why are there no, let's say future perpetuals, for example, perpetual markets on collectibles right now, on physical cards, for example, right? Or sneakers, right? Well, because there's no oracle for that. Oracles are very limited and expensive, right? Here we essentially mean that you can have an oracle to anything that's outside in the internet. Without an oracle, it's native to the chain, right? And the network itself can make the decision to understand what it's about. So it's a much larger set of use cases than what you've seen so far.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Albert. And I like the term that you used, intelligent contracts. So it's kind of like it's like a next generation of smart contracts, but made possible with AI, right, Albert?
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, right, like So smart contracts were termed by Nick Szabo, right? And they are an evolution of traditional contracts, right? In theory, right? It's like you think like traditional contracts, very, very powerful, thousands of years of development, right? Kind of decentralized actually. But the problem is that, they're really slow and they're really expensive, right? You go in a litigation, it can be costing you hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, right? It can be taking years, right? That's not something that AI can do, right? Now, if you look into blockchain, well, smart contracts are an evolution of these traditional contracts. They're just faster, cheaper, right? Self-enforcing, but they can't understand natural language, right? And they can't connect to the internet, which is a pretty big flaw, the way I look at it, right? So intelligent contracts are essentially a third generation of that, right? That essentially can have the best of both, right? So can be fast, cheap, and self-enforcing, but at the same time can understand natural language, can connect to the internet to understand what's going on, which means that you're really creating a superset of anything that has been built so far in smart contracts, right? And it actually takes a big, big chunk of what you can do with traditional contracts as well. And our hypothesis is that this is what's necessary to create a proper jurisdiction for AI to AI commerce, right? Like, if AGI comes in the next few years, you will have one in your pocket, I will have one in my pocket. The question is, are they going to be trusting each other to deal with each other, right? Or are they going to need lawyers? Or are they just going to be using smart contracts that, are very limited, right? So the hypothesis is, can we create a third layer of that so that they can trust each other through that third party, but it's essentially a decentralized network.
Got it. And talk us through where we are at the moment in terms of the rollout of GenLayer. Are we in a testnet phase? Are we in a mainnet phase? Because I can see there's also a sandbox that people can experiment in. Or they call it a simulator, I suppose. Tell us where we're at.
Yeah, so we believe in open development and we want to be as open as possible. At the end of the day, like, this is a permissionless network. Anybody can participate, write code, and do anything they want in here. So what we're doing is we're aiming for having testnet by the end of the year, right? And until then, what we're doing is we have this simulator, which is essentially the whole environment, but running locally instead of in let's say, enclosed the cloud, right? So what's happening here is, like, you can just easily download the simulator. You can run it today, no problem whatsoever. And we're essentially adding all the features that we're developing to the network directly on the simulator so that we can essentially, simulate the whole network and test all the different behaviors, right? So on the simulator, you can already write intelligent contracts. Say, like, you have that the machine itself has multiple validators, each one of them connected to a different LLM. That's a very important feature. And then essentially they reach consensus or not, depending on your intelligent contracts, right? So the intelligent contracts are written in Python, which means that, it's not like less than 1% of market share developers that know, for example, Solidity or Rust, right? Python is much, much well understood, right? Many more libraries and so on. And then you can essentially, anyone that knows Python or even like natural language can come in and just on the simulator write something. And then by the testnet, end of the year, they're going to be able to deploy it there as well.
Yep, got it. So for people that are interested in having a play around with that simulator, I'm thinking of developers really, but what's the easiest way for them to do that?
It's really like just a couple commands really on the terminal. If you go to docs.genlayer.com, you will see there like installation, and this is npm install GenLayer init, and that's it. Like, you will need to connect to an LLM. We're integrated with open source LLMs. One of the interesting things about GenLayer as well is that we're not like limited to open source LLMs. We can do both closed and open source, right? Again, what we want is as much diversity of opinions for the network as possible, right? So it's not any type of like proof of inference or anything like this where you're like verifying the execution. It's more like, you're aggregating the intelligence of multiple LLMs in order to reach a consensus, right? Yeah.
And speaking of LLMs, do you have a particular favorite? I'm not sure if you probably have to stay reasonably neutral, but what's your favorite one to use at the moment, Albert?
It changes so quickly that it's kind of crazy, right? Like, we're now really experimenting how to like double down on bringing it into the workflow within Yeager, right? Which is, like, you have O1 preview. It's absolutely great for coding complex stuff and like reasoning and thinking and math, right? But then if you want something like text, something like Claude is actually really good, right? Now I really want to test the Llama 3.2 that came yesterday, for example. I think that's going to be quite interesting to have, vision directly locally on the computer. I think that they're going to be completely commoditized, and it's just a matter of time that every computer has one of them inside. Every computer has vision as well already embedded in there, right? Which is kind of going back to GenLayer, like it basically means that the network will be able to digest images as well, right? So, we had a car crash. I can take a snapshot. I can take a photo of like whatever happened, and the network will be able to reach a conclusion on what is actually seeing that happened, right? So,
yeah, well, there's the problem is these models keep getting updated every couple of weeks, every month. So yeah, you got to spend time with each one. What about the OpenAI AI's advanced voice mode? Have you had to play around with that, Albert?
love it. Yeah. I love it. Just to I'm walking the dog and just like talking to it. It's great. I really like it. Yeah. I think it's an interesting way to learn new things. Like I had some questions on some protocols this week, and I was just like talking to it with freely. It's just like very calm. I don't know if you've seen the Notebook LLM from Google. Absolutely great. You go in there, you just like put in the GenLayer white paper, and you're gonna get essentially a podcast explaining to you, and it's like very, I like it. It's a good feeling.
Well, what I liked also, Albert, is if you go to the GenLayer website, and there's at the top it says Ask GPT. So
right.
You click on that, and it takes you through, what do you call it? Deep Thought at GenLayer, which is and it just opens up in ChatGPT. And yeah, you can chat to Deep Thought at GenLayer. So I asked it to give me some background on GenLayer. And then I said, well, I'm actually talking to Albert. He's the founder. Can you give me some questions? And boom, suddenly, you've got a whole lot of insightful questions. And it's slightly more insightful than, normal GPT, because it's trained on some of your data and white papers, I imagine, Albert.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the future is changing very quickly, right? And it's bright, but changing really quickly. And we need to be adapting, right? So like, I think that this is a very simple interface as well for people to know more about GenLayer, right? Like normally you have questions, there you go. There's a support agent, you can even like call it from others. Like it's super, super useful. So.
Do you find, it's quite an interesting place to be? I suppose you'd call it the intersection of blockchain and AI, but particularly now with, AI being such a strong narrative, just both in tech generally, but probably, maybe in investing circles and funding circles. Has that made a difference in the kind of interest that surrounds what you guys are doing, Albert?
I think it does. The problem is that there's a lot of, vaporware as well. Like that, there's a lot of promises that are not being filled. There's a lot of, misunderstanding as well. On like, okay, are we talking that we're putting the AI on the user side of things, or is that on the protocol side of things? Are we doing, blockchain for AI, or are we doing AI for blockchain? And it's a very, very different thing, right? I struggle to see many protocols that actually do AI for blockchain. Most of what I'm seeing really is like blockchain for AI, right? And what that tells me is like, there's lots of things that need to be explored, but there's just very few people looking into them, right? Many people are really focused on the low-hanging fruits of, like I understand that I have this technical requirement, which is, like computer is extremely expensive, or energy is very, very, very expensive, or training is really complex and so on, right? But actually like just trying to put the pieces together really opens up tons of new things that are not possible before, and that's where we're focused, right? On top of this, like the VCs, I think are quite polarized, right? Like some of them are like for example, I feel it's really difficult to invest in anything that's software only, right? Because like right now you go to O1 Preview, it will code anything. In a year, it will literally code anything, right? So then it's like, what's the point of investing on anything that's just code? And that's where we're building a permissionless network, right? Like it's not just the code; it's a crypto economic system, right? To me, that's much more valuable in terms of investment than if you just code again like a software as a service or something like that, which I feel it's really difficult to defend yourself from competition.
Well, put yourself forward, 10 years into the future, then Albert, how do you see GenLayer fitting into, I suppose, the wider blockchain ecosystem in 10 years' time? If you're successful, what would that look like?
If I'm successful, so there was in the 1200s, there was this thing called the Council of the Sea, which was essentially this entity in Barcelona that was essentially overseeing all the regulation and laws between the maritime commerce, right? Like there were pirates and people sending shifts here and there, right? And I think that AI is in a similar situation where, it's the Wild West. It's global. It can't be just regulated by a single country, right? And on top of this, like it moves at lightning speed, right? So you need different infrastructure to be able to do that. And I think that GenLayer is essentially that. It's essentially a kind of network state, a jurisdiction, so that AI can do commerce, right? That means that AIs can essentially reach agreement on what are the contracts that they want to be binded by, right? That they can as well, have different regulations, that they can even like have insurance on different things that are happening, that those contracts are going to be following, right? They can essentially have resolution of arbitration between them through this system. So I don't see it just as, for me, like when I'm looking at crypto right now and blockchain right now, right? Okay, so there's store of value and there's DeFi pretty much, right? And pretty much that's it, because you're just moving tokens from one place to the other. You can't really do anything off chain. And this is the big limitation, right? That's what we come to solve. Is like, okay, what can you do if instead of having a phone that just can't connect to the internet, you have one that actually understands images and on top of this can connect to the internet and do all these other things, right? What I see is that it's a superset. Like you can do way more than you could do in any other platform right now. I understand that it's difficult to see. You're looking at the big ones, but the truth here is that you need a different architecture. You need an architecture that will be evolving as the AI evolves, right? Because when AI will be 100 times more powerful, you will need an architecture that will be 100 times more powerful too. And I don't think that you can have this by any other existing blockchain.
Yeah, what's also interesting, of course, Albert, is, on current projections, the world could be, I mean, as you've really said as well, very, very different 10 years' time. That's how exponential change works. What are your thoughts on the rapid pace of AI and kind of the changes that will bring to society? And it kind of feels like, most people on the planet are just living their lives a little bit unaware of just how quickly the world is changing around them, and they're going to wake up in 5 years' time and wow, things will be different.
It's going to be a step change, right? So like you cannot really see what's, above the step, right? We're just looking up the next 10, 20 years are going to be this step, like jumping this step, right? And we don't really have a choice. Like somebody's placing us from here to there, and that's it. We'll see what happens on the other end, if it becomes like something stable or not, right? But reality here is that we cannot really understand how this will look like, I think. That's the whole point, right? The moment that you have, AIs are like 300 IQ and like more, and like they can be working 24/7, and like you can't really compete with that the way I look at it, right? I think that ultimately, I don't think that it will become something completely agentic, right? I think that they will be working for humans. So humans will have ideas and things to do, and they will help us execute all of these different things. I think that it will just be that you have way more opportunities to do stuff. Like, you don't know how to code, maybe now you go to one preview, now you get the response that actually works already, pretty much, right? So like this will just become more and more and more powerful. And ultimately, I think we'll just be empowered to do much more. I think we'll be empowered more on the health side of things, on the connections and society side of things, and even on business side of things. I think that it's very difficult to know what's above the step, but on top of this, I think it will for sure be empowering us much more than what we have right now, right? And I don't see how that can be bad. I think it's only pretty much only a positive thing. I think it's going to be challenging for many people. Like my wife, for example, she absolutely hates it. Like she's completely against it, right? But it's just because change is, it's not for everybody. That's the problem, right? You're forced to change. You're forcing people that don't want to change, right? And that's challenging.
Yeah, and unfortunately that's just going to be challenging for some people who are stuck in the mud, and that's stuck with their kind of slightly sometimes hard to operate human hardware. But the world is just going to change around them regardless. That is the nature of things. Just on, what about Yeager AI in general, Albert? What else are you guys doing at Yeager? I see that GenLayer is probably your kind of priority, but there's a few other things that you guys are doing as well, aren't there?
Yeah. So Yeager AI started essentially to explore and to try to understand how to make AI like agents reliable and useful for the real like business things, right? We started by building an agent that could build its own tooling, That was with GPT-3. That was, not reliable enough. That's what we see. Even like look right now with GPT-4o and like all these different things, you still don't have an O1 preview that really works, right? It's still not reliable enough. But it was basically on that front, right? Can you build an agent that can essentially make a plan, can execute all these different things? Just not reliable. Then we looked into the multi-agent framework world, right? So we created a multi-agent framework called GenWorlds. And what we saw there is that, anything that's code, we can compete if it's only code, right? Because like either Microsoft or OpenAI will come and do the same thing open source, right? Or, somebody else will just use one of these AIs to make it happen, right? So that's why we had these two explorations. We looked into like, how can you use this in business as well? Anything that's code, our conclusion is that, it doesn't make any sense to focus on, right? It's like, okay, maybe you can have a quick win, but you really need to be pivoting really, really fast after, because if not, somebody else will take your position, right? And then that's why we ended up focusing on, hey, can we build essentially a trustless decision-making machine, right? And this is what GenLayer is. Now, there's a lot of different services that we can build on top. We will, right? And there's a lot of things that we can do while, on a permissionless network. This is the first one that can natively connect to the internet. So there's tons of services that you can provide to the validators to do things that are useful to the applications in the network, right? Without losing the decentralization, which is quite interesting, right? So yeah, really focused on which are the verticals and the services that we can offer to the network validators and participants to do much more.
Makes perfect sense to me, Albert. All right. Well, look, for people that are interested in learning more about Yeager AI and, of course, what you guys are doing with GenLayer, just tell people, where they should go and what they should do.
Yeah. So just, feel free to join the community, look at the docs, look at the blog, let us know what you think. Really interested in seeing what people can build on it. Actually, like building on it is not that hard. As I said, it's Python. I invite anyone to just, download the simulator, try to see if they can build something interesting. We have a list of like over 100 like use cases coming out, like completely different, like things that you've never seen before, right? Ultimately, the goal is, to build, new primitives and protocols, right? So yeah, just, join the community, join as well, like the Discord and Telegram, all these different things. And yeah, we would love to have you, join.
Awesome. Thank you, Albert. It is time to start to finish off the podcast. And we do that, of course, by running you through the very famous crypto conversation hot take round. Are you up for it?
Go for it.
All right, let's go for it, Albert. I'm just going to run some questions at you. Just want you to give me your honest answers, hot take style, if you like. Question 1 for you is, where would you say that you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-chain opportunist spectrum?
I am like, 80% on the multi-chain side of things. I see store of values hugely impactful, but at the same time, store of value fights against, utility.
Yep. No, it's a very good way of putting it, Albert. All right. What would you say then is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
That AI will change everything, right? That everything that we see right now will be changing because we have, AI coming in, moving massive amounts of capital, right? Then we will have, for example, quantum as well, which will be another challenge to go through. So everything will be changing completely from like 10 years from now. We cannot be just static.
Yes, indeed. And look, Bill Gates famously said that we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. So yeah, 10 years time. We've talked about this a little bit already, Albert, but yeah, in 10 years time, AI, blockchain, humans could kind of be taken out of the equation. What are the kind of the implications for, I don't know, society, democracy, work, money, just how we live? What are we thinking?
I think you're going to be challenged by, one, you can do anything you want, which is great. But at the same time, almost everything you want has or can be done by anybody else. So how do you deal with that, right? I think it's a bit of ego. Like, do you need to be building something that nobody else has done? That's going to be extremely, extremely challenging. But you will really be able to do anything you want, which is, empowering. So,
yeah, going to be a step change indeed. All right. another way of thinking about this is a quote by sci-fi author William Gibson, who, of course, said that the future is already here, Albert. It's just not evenly distributed. With that in mind, can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people aren't aware of it?
I think large language models is that I don't think many people understand that yet. I think that, we've all known that the Turing, test would be passed at some point in the future. It's already been passed and nobody knows about it. Nobody's even talking about it, right? So I feel like, yeah, for us, we kind of quote insiders, right? We all think, oh, ChatGPT is like so commonplace and so on. I don't think it is at all. I think most people don't understand this, most in humanity, right? So, yeah, I think that's the largest one right now.
I couldn't agree more, Albert. I think you're exactly right. Like if you and I, we use, the new voice mode on GPT, but if you show just someone else, like, your wife or your son or someone else, they're amazed because it is literally like magic. Like it's so, the difference between Siri and an advanced GPT voice mode is like, it's bonkers. It's science fiction, but it is real. It's magic.
It is. Yeah. I think that, I hope that this gap will be short, narrowing over the next few years, because if not, people are going to be extremely shocked.
Indeed. All right. Brings us nicely to our final question, Albert, which is, what is your favorite sci-fi film, book, or movie, or TV show?
Sci-fi, I would say, really Babylon 5. I absolutely love it. Yeah, just like I really get lost into it, and like for me, it's great.
Excellent. Babylon 5. I've never seen Babylon 5, but yeah. There you go.
All right. Thanks, Andy. It's been great. It's awesome.
Yes, indeed. And that is the end of the show. Thank you so much for coming and spending some time with us, Albert. Just to close out the show, tell people where they can find you on X or wherever else you like to hang out online. And again, just shout out the websites again for Yeager AI and GenLayer.
So yeah, like I'm on Twitter at Castellana, so KSTLLANA, and then GenLayer is at GenLayer. That's it. Yeah, like come hang out in the Discord, on Telegram as well, and just feel free to reach out anytime. We're always here and always happy to onboard new community members. So thanks for having us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Albert. All the best, and bye for now.